Mary and Jesus now speak about the Assumption. Mary speaks first. Did I die? Yes. If you call death the separation of the choice part of the spirit from the body. No. If by death you understand the separation of the vivifying soul from the body, the corruption of the flesh no longer vivified by the soul, and before that, the lugubrious sepulchre, and before all these things, the pangs of death. Just a pause there. There's an important doctrinal statement about the soul and the spirit. There are some Protestants who go astray because St. Paul speaks of spirit, soul and body, and they believe there are three elements to the person as opposed to body and soul, where we say there are two elements. Mary is making clear here that the choice part of the spirit separated from her body, but her vivifying soul did not. So we know that the soul animates the body. That remained in her, and so she did not see corruption in the way that we will see corruption when we die. So her soul, vivifying part, remained in her body. As one might say, the engine room remained there. So the body didn't see corruption. But the part of the soul, which we might say is the spirit, she says, the choice part of the spirit from the body, that was separated. That left her mortal body. And this enables us to say, yes, it's perfectly proper to speak of spirit, soul and body, as St. Paul does. But it's also absolutely correct to say there's not a tripart division in the human being. There are two fundamental parts, body and soul. And within the soul is the spirit, if I say within, not wishing to make it seem physical or in space. And thus, once again, we have a confirmation of the correctness of the Catholic position. Continuing with what Mary has to say. How did I die? Or better, how did I pass from the earth to heaven? First with my immortal part, then with the perishable one, as it was fair for her who did not become acquainted with the stain of sin. That evening, the sabbatic rest had already begun. I was speaking to John about Jesus and his things. The evening hour was full of peace. The Sabbath had abated all noises of human works, and the hour was abating every voice of man and bird. Only the olive trees around the house were rustling in the evening breeze, and a flight of angels seemed to graze the walls of the solitary house. We were speaking of Jesus, of the Father, of the kingdom of heaven. To speak of love and of the kingdom of love is to become lit with the living fire, consuming the bonds of matter to let the spirit free for its mystic flights. And if the fire is contained within the limits fixed by God to preserve creatures on the earth, at his service it is possible to live and burn, finding in the ardour not the consumption, but the completion of life. But when God removes the limits and gives freedom to the divine fire to assail and attract the spirit to itself without any measure, then the spirit, replying in turn without measure to the love, detaches itself from matter and flies where the love urges and invites it. And it is the end of the exile and the return to the fatherland. That evening, the incontainable ardour, the measureless vitality of my spirit was joined by a sweet languor, by a mysterious sensation that matter was moving away from what surrounded it, as if my body, tired, were falling asleep, whilst my intellect, even livelier in its reasoning, was sinking into the divine brightness. John, the loving, prudent witness of every action of mine, since he'd become my adoptive son according to the will of my only begotten Son, kindly convinced me to rest on the little bed, and he watched me praying. The last sound I heard on the earth was the murmur of the words of John, the virgin apostle. They were for me like a lullaby of a mother near a cradle, and they accompanied my spirit in its last ecstasy, too sublime to be described. They accompanied me as far as heaven. John, the only witness of this sweet mystery, arranged me by himself, enveloping me in my white mantle without changing my dress or veil, without any washing or embalming. The Spirit of John, as is evident from his words of the second episode of this cycle that goes from the Pentecost to my Assumption, already knew that I would not decay, and it taught the apostle what to do. And he, chaste, loving, prudent with regard to the mysteries of God and his remote companions, decided to keep the secret and to wait for the other servants of God so that they could see me again and draw comfort and assistance from that sight for the pains and hardships of their mission. He waited as if he was certain of their coming. But the decree of God was different. Good as always for the favourite, just as usual for all the believers. He made the eyes of the former heavy with sleep, so that he might be spared the torture of seeing also my body abducted from him. He presented the believers with a further truth that would encourage them to believe in the resurrection of the flesh, in the reward of an eternal blissful life granted to the just, in the most mighty and pleasant truths of the New Testament, my Immaculate Conception, my divine virginal maternity, in the divine and human nature of my Son, true God and true man, born not by human will, but through divine nuptials and divine seed laid in my womb. And lastly, that they might believe that in heaven there is my heart of the mother of all men, palpitating with anxious love for everybody, just people and sinners, eager to have you all with it in the blessed fatherland forever. When I was taken out of the little house by the angels, had my spirit already come back to me? No. My spirit was not to descend again on the earth. It was adoring before the throne of God. But when the earth, the exile, the time and the place of the separation from my one and trine Lord were left forever, my spirit came back to shine in the centre of my soul, drawing the flesh from its sleep. So it is just to say that I ascended to heaven in body and soul, not through my own capability, as it happened for Jesus, but through angelic help. I awoke from that mysterious and mystic sleep. I rose. I flew finally, because by now my flesh had achieved the perfection of glorified bodies. And I loved. I loved my Son, whom I found again, and my Lord, one and trine. I loved him, as is the destiny of all the eternal living beings. That was a statement given by Mary on the 18th of April 1948.